Well, I mean, ultimately, it's an incredible period for news, and the fact that millions of people are turning to the New York Times to try and understand what's going on in the world. And I think I see this period as one where we've got better at the whole business of making digital products and delighting users with the use of those products. But more fundamentally, unlike most news organizations, we've invested in journalism. We've got many more journalists today than we've ever had in the history of the New York Times. And, you know, we're picking the best journalists in the world, and they're going out and doing a great job explaining what's happening in the world.
Mark, to Sarah's point, have you seen things taper off at all since the publication of the Mueller report? If you look at some of the live TV numbers of some of your media peers, it looks like there's been some fall off, or do you still think you're confident to hit your over 200,000 subscriber growth per quarter for the rest of 2019?
Yeah, I mean, quarters vary. The present quarter, Q2, has always historically been a little bit lower than other quarters for us. But actually, news audiences are very strong. And it's worth saying that that first week of Mueller, when the news came out that Attorney General Barr was going to receive the Mueller report, that was also the week when there was the terrible fire at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. And Notre Dame was a bigger story for the Times than that week. The Mueller report was that week. We're very broadly based, the Times. Things that have been popping in recent days include things like our recaps of Game of Thrones have been doing fantastic business. So the Times is very full service. We're not like one of those cable networks which has been kind of living off the Trump story and nothing else. We do a full range of stories, and I'd say, in recent months, our continued coverage of Me Too, that started with our investigations into Harvey Weinstein and Bill O'Reilly, are, I think, continually great coverage of tech, great investigative journalism of what's going on in Silicon Valley. There's a very broad base of content, and I think that's one of the reasons that we're seeing a kind of steady growth in subscribers, which is not dependent on the US political cycle alone.
You're also proving to be somewhat of an anomaly in the overall newspaper business, Mark. I mean, struggles at local papers across this country. And tomorrow, actually, Gannett shareholders are going to face this proxy battle vote. They're facing a hostile takeover by M&G, backed by a hedge fund who's proposing boards. Like, what does this whole situation tell us about the state and the future of the newspaper business?
Well, I think much of the newspaper business, sadly, took decisions over the years to try and rescue their businesses by cutting costs and cutting journalists. And now they're left trying different combinations of defensive consolidation. So complicated financial engineering and attempting to squeeze further costs out to get as much cash out of these businesses as they can as they decline. We've got a simpler idea, which is closer to what Netflix is up to and the other TV streaming services, which is you invest in great content, you build your content, you make it attractive to users, you make it easy for those users to subscribe, you get more and more subscribers, and that enables you to invest in more great content. So we've found a way of getting into a virtuous circle of growth, rather than what I'm afraid is looking like a vicious cycle of decline for much of American newspapers.
Mark, you decided not to join the Apple News offering. I mean, talk us through why you made that decision and what you think about the offering overall. Do you think it's important that readers clearly know who has written the stories that they're reading and the identity of that publisher?
I do, Wilf. I mean, we have a presence on Apple News. We give Apple News a few stories a day, and that's to distribute our journalism very widely. We know we've got lots of readers who've got Apple devices, and we want to be present on those devices. But our theory is very simple. We think that the best way of consuming news is when you come to a news organization's own digital assets, you know where you are, you know the provenance of the news, you get used to the individual contributors, whether they're, these are faces or whether they're voices or whether they're bylines, and you know where you are. And by the way, if you don't like what you read, you can complain. You can hold them to account. We think that although they're a fact of life, all of the different ways, all the feeds and things like Google News and Apple News, where all the different sources are jumbled together, no matter how skillfully that's done, in the end, it's confusing. It makes it harder for people to tell what's true and what isn't true. And in the end, it's also bad for the news business. It's one of the reasons that those newspapers are closing is because it's taking the possibility of an effective business away from, not from us, but from many, many other news organizations.